There are places in this world that maps refuse to explain. Places where something happened and no one ever found the full truth. I've spent most of my life chasing stories like these, through abandoned facilities, forgotten towns, and moments people would rather erase from history. Some of what I found changed the way I see the world forever. Tonight, I want to share one of those stories with you. And trust me, by the end of it, you may never look at this case the same way again.
This story is a work of fiction. All characters, events, locations, and situations shown in this video are entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The man sitting across from me had prepared for every question I was supposed to ask. His timeline was clean. His voice never shook. He remembered what color tie Mark Hensley wore that morning, what time the rain started, even which streetlight was flickering outside the accounting office. For 40 minutes, Elliot Graves smiled like a man who had nothing to hide. Then I looked at the coffee cup in front of him, half empty, one sugar packet torn open beside it, and I asked him one simple question. Why did you ask for sugar if you told me you were allergic to it? That was the first time his face changed. Not much. Just enough. The smile disappeared. His fingers stopped moving. And for one quiet second, the man who had remembered every detail forgot which version of himself he was pretending to be. I've seen a lot of lies break in interrogation rooms. Most don't break loudly. They don't come apart with shouting or slammed fists or dramatic confessions. Most lies break in small places. A pause, a blink, a word repeated too quickly. A man asking for sugar after telling you he never touches it. This happened years ago when I was still working investigations in Brea County. My name is Caleb Ross. Back then, I was 45, tired more often than I admitted, and still convinced that if you followed the facts long enough, they would eventually tell the truth. I know better now. Facts tell you what happened. People tell you why. And sometimes, if you listen carefully enough, the smallest mistake tells you both. The case began with a missing accountant named Mark Hensley, 52 years old, quiet man, methodical. The kind of person who sharpened pencils before balancing ledgers and kept receipts from 10 years ago in labeled boxes. His wife, Nora, reported him missing on a Monday morning. She didn't come in hysterical. That was the first thing I remember about her. She was calm. Too calm, some officers thought. But grief doesn't always perform for strangers. Nora sat across from me with both hands folded over her purse and said, "My husband would never leave without writing it down." That sentence stayed with me. Mark Hensley wrote everything down. Appointments, mileage, grocery lists, bank deposits, birthdays, storm warnings. If a pipe leaked under the kitchen sink, Mark wrote down the date, the plumber's name, and the cost of the washer. So when he vanished without a note, without his medication, and without calling Nora, I believed her. Something had happened. At first, the town didn't. People liked simple explanations. Mark had been under pressure. Mark handled money for half the businesses in town. Mark had recently looked tired. Maybe he ran, maybe he took money. Maybe he started over somewhere else. That was the public version. But public versions are usually built by people who don't have to sleep beside the empty side of the bed. Nora knew better, and after 2 days with Mark's files, so did I. His accounting office was above a dental clinic on Hill Street. Small place, 2 desks, 1 locked cabinet, a wall clock that had stopped at 8:17, a coffee maker that looked older than my first patrol car. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no overturned chair, no dramatic clue waiting in the middle of the room. But Mark's main notebook was missing. That mattered, because Nora was right. Mark wrote everything down. If something had scared him, It would be in that notebook. We found one torn page left behind in his desk drawer. Just 3 names. Victor Lane, Harbour Point Development. E.G. At the time, E.G. didn't mean much. Then Detective Mara found Elliot Graves. Elliot was a local insurance consultant, 38 years old, polite, clean record, married, 1 daughter, the kind of man who looked harmless in every photograph. He had met Mark twice that week regarding commercial insurance reviews for several town properties, including properties tied to Victor Lane. Victor Lane was the kind of man small towns protect without realizing it. Wealthy, generous in public, always wearing a pressed coat, always shaking hands at charity dinners. If a school needed a new scoreboard, Victor paid for part of it. If the hospital needed donors, Victor's name appeared on the wall. Men like that don't need to threaten people openly. Their reputation does half the work for them. But at the beginning, Elliot Graves was the one sitting closest to Mark's disappearance. So we brought him in, not under arrest. Just an interview. That's what we called it. Everyone in that room knew it was more than that. The interrogation room was cold that night. They always are. Fluorescent light overhead, metal table, 2 chairs, a wall clock that ticked too loud when nobody spoke. Rain tapped against the narrow window near the ceiling. Elliot sat across from me in a navy jacket, hands folded neatly, posture relaxed. Mara stood behind the observation glass. I could feel her watching. Elliot smiled when I came in. "Detective Ross," he said. "I hope I can help clear this up." That was the second thing that bothered me. Innocent people usually want to help find the missing person. Elliot wanted to help clear things up. Different instinct, different priority. I sat down and opened the folder. "Tell me about Mark Hensley." He sighed, just enough to sound concerned. "Good man. Careful. Maybe too careful." "What does that mean?" "He worried about numbers most people wouldn't notice." "Sounds like a good accountant." Elliot smiled again. "I suppose it does." For the next 30 minutes, he gave me a perfect story. He met Mark at 5:10 p.m. They discussed insurance documents. Mark seemed distracted. Elliot left at 5:42. He drove to a diner on Mason Street, bought dinner, called his wife at 6:18, arrived home before 7. Every time I asked for a detail, he had one ready, 2 ready. He remembered the waitress had red glasses. He remembered Mark wore a grey tie. He remembered the office smelled like burnt coffee. He remembered rain starting at 5:36. People think too many details make a story stronger. They don't. Real memory is uneven. You remember the strange thing, the emotional thing, the useless thing. You don't remember everything cleanly unless you've practiced remembering it. When I stepped out for a moment, Mara met me in the hallway. "He's rehearsed," she said. "I know. People who rehearse too much usually forget something small." She was right. She usually was. When I went back in, Elliot asked for coffee. "Black," he said at first. Then he laughed softly and added, "No sugar. I avoid certain additives." "Allergy issue." I nodded and sent someone for coffee. At the time, I didn't care about the sugar. Not yet. We kept going. I asked him if he had entered Mark's office after that day. "No, ever. Just that one meeting." "You sure?" "Positive." He said it too quickly, so I changed direction. "Mark's wife says he was nervous that week." Elliot tilted his head. "About what?" "That's what I'm asking you." I wouldn't know. I watched his hands, still folded, still controlled. Then I said, "His notebook is missing." For the first time, Elliot's thumb moved against his ring finger. Just once. But I saw it. "What notebook?" he asked. "The one he used for work." "No idea. You never saw." "You were in his office for a meeting." And you didn't see his notebook? I wasn't looking for notebooks, detective. Good answer. Too good. A young officer brought in coffee during the break. Mine black. Elliot's with cream. The officer also placed a few sugar packets on the table out of habit. We stepped out again. Myra and I watched through the glass. Elliot sat alone. For the first time, he looked tired. Not guilty, tired. There's a difference. He rubbed his face, stared down at the cup, then reached for a sugar packet, tore it open, poured it in. No hesitation, no thought. That was when Mara glanced at me. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Small contradictions are fragile. If you grab them too early, people explain them away. So I let it sit there on the table. A little white packet beside a paper cup. The kind of detail nobody would notice unless they were waiting for a lie to breathe. When I returned, I shifted to Mark's office. Tell me again what time you left. 5:42. Mark was alive? Yes. Did he walk you out? No. Where was he when you left? At his desk. Doing what? Writing something. In the notebook you never saw. Elliot paused. Small, but real. I assumed. You assumed he was writing in a notebook you didn't see? He had papers. What kind of papers? I don't know. No. I leaned back. The room went quiet except for the clock. Then I asked, was the wall clock already broken when you were there? Elliot looked at me. Yes. There it was. Another small crack. I had not told him the clock was broken. That detail was not in the public report. Mara shifted behind the glass. Elliot realized it a second too late. I mean, he said, I think it was. I don't remember it moving. You said you didn't notice much in the office. I noticed the clock. Why? He smiled again, but it was weaker now. Because you're asking about time. That answer was clever. But clever is not the same as true. I let him breathe for a while. People hate silence in interrogation rooms. They fill it. And when they fill it, they often bring something useful with them. But Elliot didn't speak. He just looked at his coffee. That was when I decided to use the sugar. I pointed to the cup. Elliot. He looked up. Why did you ask for sugar if you told me you were allergic to it? Nothing in the room moved. Not his hands. Not his eyes. Not the little plastic stirrer near his cup. Then he gave a small laugh. I said additives. You said sugar. I meant certain sweeteners. You poured in regular sugar. I forgot. You forgot your allergy? His face changed again. This time, more clearly. The confidence drained out of him slowly, like water leaving a cracked glass. It's been a long night, he said. It has. I misspoke. About the sugar? Yes. And the clock? He didn't answer. And the notebook? Still nothing. I leaned forward. You prepared for every question about your timeline. You prepared for the diner, the phone call, the drive home, the color of Mark's tie. But you didn't prepare for yourself. His breathing changed. That was the moment the interrogation turned. Not because I had solved the case. Because Elliot realized I had found the edge of the lie. And once a man sees the edge, he starts wondering how much of it is already visible. I said, you were in Mark's office after he disappeared. No. You knew about the clock. No. You knew about the notebook. No. You lied about the sugar because your story needed you to be someone careful and controlled. You're tired, Elliot. And tired men forget rehearsed details. He looked toward the mirror, not at himself. Whoever he imagined might be watching from the other side. That mattered. Elliot wasn't just afraid of me. He was afraid beyond the room. So I changed tactics. Who are you protecting? His jaw tightened. No one. Victor Lane? His eyes flicked up. Just once. But enough. There are names that land in a room with weight. Victor's name did that. Elliot whispered, I want a lawyer. He had that right. And normally, that would have ended the conversation. But before I stood, he said one more thing. You don't know what he can do. Not what I did. Not what happened. What he can do. That was the first honest sentence Elliot Graves gave me. After his attorney arrived, Elliot changed course. He gave a confession, or something that looked like one. He admitted he had gone back to Mark's office later that night. He admitted taking the notebook. He admitted moving documents. He said Mark had discovered Elliot was involved in improper insurance filings, and Elliot panicked. According to his statement, Mark left the office alive, and Elliot destroyed records to protect himself. Clean. Convenient. Too convenient. The confession put guilt on Elliot, but kept Victor Lane untouched. That was when I knew the confession was another performance. Mara said it first. He's taking the fall for part of it. I nodded. Not all, and not for free. We pulled Elliot's phone records. His phone had been off for exactly 42 minutes that night. Not dead. Off. We found a parking receipt from a storage facility outside town. 6:03 p.m. Elliot claimed he had been at the diner by then. The diner receipt was real, but the time had been manually entered. That brought us back to Victor. Mark's torn page listed Victor Lane and Harbour Point Development. Mara dug into property transfers, shell companies, insurance claims, inflated valuations, money moving through businesses that looked separate, but all led back to Victor. Mark Hensley had found the pattern, and because Mark wrote everything down, he had become dangerous. Then Nora gave us the final piece. She came into the station the next morning holding a small envelope. I found this behind our bedroom dresser, she said. Inside was a note from Mark, not emotional, not dramatic, just practical. If something happens, check the clock. That was all. Check the clock. We went back to Mark's office with a warrant. The wall clock had stopped at 8:17 because the battery had been removed. Behind the clock frame, tucked inside the wall mount, was a folded ledger page. Mark's handwriting, names, amounts, dates, Victor Lane, Harbour Point, Elliot Graves. And one transfer made the night Mark disappeared. That page did what Elliot's confession tried to avoid. It connected Victor directly to the fraud. The storage unit connected him to the cover-up. Inside, we found Mark's missing notebook, shredded documents, and a coat with traces from the accounting office. No dramatic villain's speech followed. Real powerful men rarely confess in rooms with cameras. Victor denied everything. Then he blamed Elliot. Then he blamed Mark. Then he blamed accounting errors. But the evidence had finally stopped being convenient for him. Elliot eventually cooperated, not because he became brave overnight. Fear doesn't disappear that quickly. He cooperated because we made it clear Victor could no longer protect himself by destroying weaker men. The truth came out slowly. Mark confronted Victor about the fraud. Victor sent Elliot to retrieve the notebook and scare Mark into silence. Something happened in that office. Not the version Elliot gave at first. Not the version Victor wanted. Mark never made it home. I won't dress that part up. Nora lost her husband. And no confession, no arrest, no ledger page hidden behind a clock could give him back. But she got the truth. Sometimes that is the only justice left. Elliot was charged for his role. Victor Lane was arrested after the financial records and storage unit evidence tied him to the cover-up. The town was shocked, of course. Towns always are when the man with his name on hospital plaques turns out to have dirt under his nails. But I wasn't shocked. Not by then. By then I had learned something. The calmest man in the room is not always innocent. The guilty man is not always the most dangerous. And sometimes a lie does not break because you ask the perfect question. It breaks because the person telling it forgets how much of himself he had to erase to make it work. Years later, people asked me about that interrogation. They wanted to hear about pressure, strategy, technique. They wanted the dramatic version, but the truth is simpler. I didn't break Elliot Graves. A cup of coffee did. A torn sugar packet did. A stopped clock did. Mark Hensley did, from beyond the room, because he knew enough to leave one last note where careful people would eventually look. And Nora did, because she refused to accept the easy explanation. I still think about Elliot sometimes, not with sympathy exactly. He lied. He helped cover up a crime. He let a grieving woman wait for answers while he protected himself. But I also remember the way he looked toward that mirror when I said Victor Lane's name. That was fear. Real fear. And fear makes cowards out of men who might have once believed they were decent. That doesn't excuse what they do. It only explains how they get there. The last time I saw Nora Hensley, she was standing outside the station holding Mark's recovered notebook in both hands. She didn't cry. She just said, "He wrote it down." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, he did." That was enough for her. Maybe not enough to heal, but enough to know she had been right. Mark had not vanished willingly. He had not run. He had not betrayed the life they built. He had tried to tell the truth in the only way he knew how, by writing it down. As for me, I kept one thing from that case in my memory more than anything else. Not Victor's arrest, not Elliot's confession, not even the ledger page. I remember that paper coffee cup sitting on the metal table, half empty, sugar packet torn open beside it. A tiny mistake in a carefully built lie. Most lies break under pressure. But the dangerous ones don't break when a man is afraid. They break when he forgets which version of himself he was pretending to be.